JP here. I've met a lot of astronauts in my 40-plus years in aerospace. Like every other business, there are wonderful folks and there are not so wonderful folks. This is a story about both. My favorite astronaut is Chekov from the Starship Enterprise, or more to the point, the actor Walter Koenig. Now, I can just hear you. JP has finally cracked. He's like the folks on Galaxy Quest that believe it's all real. Well, or maybe you're thinking, hey, it was Captain Kirk that just flew to space on the Blue Origin rocket, not Chekov. I assure you, I haven't cracked. Well, at least not any more than I already am. And this is why Walter Koenig is my favorite astronaut. You know, this really happened. The names have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty, except, of course, for Walter Koenig's name. About 18 years ago, I was speaking at a space conference. The night before the conference was to start, there was one of those wine and cheese get-togethers for the speakers. One of the speakers that was going to be there was a famous astronaut. Now, we're just going to call him Famous Astronaut. I'm not going to say who it was. He was likely just having a really bad day. We also had a booth at the conference, and we had an army of JP Aerospace team members there for booth duty. Now, we have this one team member who is just obsessed with astronauts. We're going to call this total fanboy Mike, not his real name, because he's pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. And he would be appalled if he knew that I was making a video about this. So, sorry, Mike. Anyway, Mike had always dreamed of meeting and shaking the hand of this particular famous astronaut. Big-time hero worship. I was allowed to bring one guest to the soiree, so I had Mike join me. Now, I had met Famous Astronaut maybe a dozen times. We had sat on a couple of panels together, but we really don't know each other. But the last time we ran into each other, he remembered my name, so I figured I could drag Mike over, introduce him, and Mike could get his handshake. We were hobnobbing at the event, making small talk with the other speakers, when Mike spotted Famous Astronaut. Mike panicked. His hero was standing right there, and someone had snuck in and glued Mike's feet to the floor. These wine and cheese things are more dangerous than you might think. Well, after some prodding, we made our way over. We waited until Famous Astronaut was done talking to another guest, and then we walked right up to him, and I said, "Hi, Famous Astronaut, good to see you. This is my friend Mike." The Famous Astronaut looked at Mike and said, "Are you important? Do I need to talk to you?" Mike froze. And then the Famous Astronaut turned around and walked off. Mike just stood there with these giant, soul-crushed eyes, watching Famous Astronaut's back as he left. I didn't know what to do. My friend was devastated, and now we're just standing there in this crowded ballroom. I looked around, and on the other side of the room is Chekov from Star Trek. He's standing there about 50 feet from us, talking to a group of people. Now, I don't have any idea why he's there. Maybe he's a spokesman for some company. Maybe he's a speaker or a guest of a speaker. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. But now I have a plan to rescue Mike from his despair. I grabbed Mike by the arms and marched him across the room. We burst in front of Chekov, interrupting whoever he was talking to. I dragged Mike right in front of him and proclaimed, "Mr. Koenig, this is Mike. He builds spaceships with me, and he's a big fan." I held my breath and hoped. Walter Koenig looked Mike in the eye, and with the full force of being the navigator for the Starship Enterprise, put out his hand and said, "Wonderful to meet you, Mike." He was warm, kind, asked Mike about what he did in the space business. He listened thoughtfully and was completely gracious. After a couple of minutes, he said he needed to get back to his other guests. We stammered our thanks and headed for the door. We were the ones being rude, interrupting as we did. Mr. Koenig was a complete class act. Now, Mike had completely forgotten about his encounter with famous astronaut, or he was having a mental block. Anyway, Mike spent the next few days at the conference telling everyone who would listen about his meeting with Chekov. And that's why Chekov, Walter Koenig, is my favorite astronaut. And if you're out there, Mr. Koenig, thank you. This is JP. Till next time, thank you for watching.